So, who's really the weapon here? Is it /Pennywise or Mr. Dick Hallorann? That's certainly how General Shaw is using Dick Hallorann. Like General Shaw is going after a weapon, but he's using Dick Hallorann as a weapon to get it. Love that line. He flipped through that boy's mind like it was the morning paper. Oh, I love it. And now, /Pennywise went into Dick's mind like Dick went into Daniel's mind last episode, complete with the smile. Oh, I love it. And unlocked The Shining. Oh my gosh. The end of this episode to me was so incredible, so satisfying. I would argue bigger. I mean, again, I'm a super fan of that movie, The Shining, but I would argue bigger than Pennywise finally showing up, although we're going to discuss that as well. Bill Skarsgård didn't disappoint, or did he? What did you think of Pennywise, him finally showing up and how it worked? I think the whole Maddie misdirect really makes it beautiful. We're going to talk about all of this. But first, Dick. All right, so as powerful as he has been on this show, it turns out Dick Hallorann has locked away most of his actual power, as his grandmother had recommended back when she was alive, and she shares the same abilities. Now, this sequence itself is very telling, and we'll dig into that as well. But I think what we really want to talk about first is what can Dick now do? What's he going to be able to do now that he has his full powers? Well, he's already had significant telepathic abilities. I love the discussion we're about to have about this whole episode. It's so good. All right, but according to Stephen King mythology, those people who have The Shining can see dead people, right? Check. He's already got that right off the bat. That's how Dick realizes that his powers have been let loose. Because when he emerges from the sewers, he sees Russo's ghost, given away by those dead eyes. I feel really bad for Russo. A hero's death for sure. But there's so much more that Dick might be able to do. So telepathy, right? Seeing the dead, which we also, by the way, saw with Danny in The Shining. That's how he was able to see all those ghosts at the Overlook Hotel. Seeing the past and the future, not just going into someone's mind and seeing their memories of the past, but really being a clairvoyant, being able to look forward, backwards and forwards. That would be big. Telekinesis, as many of you know, that is my favorite superpower. So I hope that Dick gets that. A lot of funny moments talking about Dick. All right. So anyway, and this is interesting. Also potentially the ability to heal and astral projections. As I went through this list of powers and I thought about it, think. It made me wonder if the Shine might somehow be related to /Pennywise, right? Who does have similar abilities. Telepathy, maybe astral projections. Because again, the whole sequence where the Dick goes into Daniel's mind, right? I mean, there's so many similarities to what Pennywise does, even to the smile. Why did they choose to have Dick smile at Daniel like that? I think it has to mean something. To me, it's very interesting. I think there could be a Dick Hallorann Pennywise/it connection. But regardless of that bigger question, in this episode itself, I had to ask myself, why would it/Pennywise want to make Dick Hallorann more powerful when Dick's being used to hunt him, right? Unless he felt that he could get Dick Hallorann to switch sides and he could use him. As it/Pennywise says, power like this should be used. Oh, right? So let's talk family, right? Dick's grandparents, and of course, Mrs. Kersh, who finally has been confirmed. And we learned a little bit more. Is it/Pennywise sleeping with Hank Grogan? That's definitely a big question, and I can't wait to share my theories on it and to hear your thoughts on it. But first, we got to touch on Dick Hallorann's grandparents. All right, so if you know your Dick Hallorann history, you would know that he was not only tormented by his grandfather, but pretty seriously abused by him as well. So it/Pennywise really hit the bullseye when it comes to thinking of or becoming something that would truly scare Dick Hallorann, even as an adult, a very powerful adult. This was a way to really get to him. I really liked the imagery in this sequence because you have Dick's grandmother, who also has the Shine, the same abilities, still trying to help her grandson from beyond the grave, styled like an angel. And then you have Dick's grandfather, a truly evil presence in his life, and his shirt has a slight red tinge to it. So it really is a devil and an angel on Dick Hallorann's shoulders. And I think that's really fantastically well done. Not only script-wise and thematically, but really working the visuals. But yeah, you want to talk about Mrs. Kersh. All right, so who or what is Mrs. Kersh? I think in the original Stephen King source material, it was implied that she was it / Pennywise, just like that mother in the car in the opening who abducts Maddie. That's actually it / Pennywise, just one of his many forms. Yet in It Chapter 2, she says that she was Bob Gray's daughter. And Bob Gray is a very important person here, particularly now that the movies have taken this story over. So that was an actual person, a carnival clown back in 1908, one of its feeding periods, who, the theory goes, it's been hinted at, was somehow special to it. And it was with Bob Gray that it created what would become its favorite persona, Pennywise. One of the reasons this show even exists is that Bill Skarsgård was eager to tell Pennywise's origin story. With Bob Gray. And so I wonder how much we'll get into it. They've been really hoping to get multiple seasons here, but, you might not if you don't put your best foot forward with the first season. All right. Now, as for the daughter theory, we talked about that before, and some people had said there's no way that Madeleine Stowe is old enough to be Bob Gray's daughter. Well, guess what? She's a rockin' 67. Good for you, Madeleine Stowe. And so the age does line up. In fact, it lines up perfectly. All right, get this. You're going to love this. So the show takes place in 1962. And so let's say she's 67 in 1962. That would make her born in 1895. And guess how old she would be in 1908? She would be turning 13, which means she would be 12, which is the favorite age of characters in this universe. That's amazing. That's just amazing how that works out. I don't think that they intended it that way, but the math is mathin'. The math is mathin'. So she could be Bob Gray's daughter, right? Or she could be an extension of it / Pennywise. Some have also pointed out over the years when discussing it that its true form is not just a spider, but a pregnant spider, which would mean that maybe it's female, or maybe it can switch genders. Maybe it's like Mystique, which would be really interesting. I love what they've been doing with Mystique in the X-Men comics. It's a very different time than when Mystique was first introduced, when the It novel was first written. And I think that they can do some really intriguing things here. So who do you want Mrs. Kersh to be? It / Pennywise, right? Or do you want it to be Bob Gray's daughter, now working with the entity that has consumed her father? All right. Now, if she's working, even if she is Pennywise, I think here's an extension of the theory, which I think points to her being the daughter, because you'll note that she can operate outside of the pillars. And I think she's up to something pretty interesting. So the first time I watched this episode, just like when I first saw the Shine box and I geeked out, and here when I heard Mrs. Kersh, I geeked out. But then the second time I watched the episode to do my notes for this breakdown, in both cases I asked myself, why? Why? Now, we talked about the why of unlocking Dick Hallorann's powers. What's going on with Mrs. Kersh? Why? So one epiphany I had here was she got herself on the military base. OMG. Remember, the military base is supposedly safe from Pennywise because it's outside Derry. It's outside the pillars that keep Pennywise trapped in town. They built Derry right in the middle of those pillars, man. So this would support the theory, as I said, that Mrs. Kersh is Bob Gray's daughter, almost like his familiar, right? Working for it / Pennywise, who can go beyond the pillars, get on that base, and maybe do some kind of surprise attack on Operation Precept. Ooh, I like that theory. I like it a lot. But why did she get involved with Hank Grogan in the first place, right? Does it / Pennywise always look for a fall guy, right? For the feeding? So people don't get suspicious. They can explain it away every 27 years. Off of that logic, maybe the Bradley gang wasn't as bad as it seemed. Maybe the Bradley gang was at first, before Pennywise had them killed off, a cover for it / Pennywise's victims. I hope we get multiple seasons so we can maybe explore that. Or, also another thing that could be that Mrs. Kersh is a real human being, right? She's lonely working for it / Pennywise. And, she's just looking for a human connection. Clearly Mr. Kersh is not great to be married to. Has a much darker side than his cheerful demeanor at the butcher shop. I think he's going to live up to his nickname by the end of the season, Stanley Cleaver. He might be going mad, perhaps married to Mrs. Kersh, but we also learned from the Native Americans that it/Pennywise sheds its evilness into the sewers, which means it goes into the drinking water, whipping the town into a frenzy every 27 years that ends with an explosive event with all that evil energy going out, right? You have the Kitchener Ironworks in 1908, the Bradley Gang Massacre in 1935, and I think in 1962, it's going to be the Black Spot, that nightclub that Dick Hallorann and his fellow military servicemen are setting up. There wasn't an event in 1989 as the Losers Club defeated it/Pennywise. So yeah, Pennywise finally showed up. Let's talk about it. Duck and cover, kiddos. I loved that line. Oh, it was so fantastic, not only in the delivery, but again, why? What does it mean? Is he mocking Maturin's advice? I mean, that's the turtle going around saying that. Or was it his advice all along? You know, it/Pennywise is all about instilling fear, particularly in children. And those nuclear safety videos are terrifying. And if you think back again to the opening credits for this show, who was revealed to be running that projector in the classroom? Pennywise. Oh my God. Those opening credits, I think, are not only gorgeous and so interesting, but important to this show. They highlight all the big explosive events, or most of them, that we just discussed. And then that is a very important element as well. Be sure to check out my standalone video diving into the opening credits, link down below. But the real shocker this episode was that for a little while, he did not scare the Losers Club. Instead, he baited them, pretending to give them hope as Maddie. Oh, wow, this was incredible. I fell for it. Yes, Maddie showed up, and it seemed he had survived, and he told his friends that Phil had survived too. How many of you were just so happy to hear that, just as Pennywise had intended? You know, we thought that the show was telegraphing that Phil was still alive. He's not, he's dead, but instead it was Pennywise within the show setting that trap for the Losers Club. How amazing is that? So wow, Pennywise can play the long game, and Pennywise can do subtle, and Pennywise can change up his tactics, which means it's even more likely that Mrs. Kersh is working for him, manipulating Lily with her advice, right? Although this episode, Mrs. Kersh used reverse psychology on Lily. Do not go down into the sewer. You totally should call the police. And what does it/Pennywise say to Lily when he sees her? You convinced everyone to come and see me. But before Pennywise/it can chow down on her, and I'm not so sure he was necessarily going to do that, but he's stopped by the dagger. I loved the look on it/Pennywise's face when he realized the dagger was there. Bill Skarsgård is so creative with his performance. You know, first he just froze with his teeth out. Embarrassing. And then he looked down at it in a mixture of disgust and frustration, like resigned to the fact that at least for now, there's just nothing he can do about it. And as he retreated, Lily bent down and picked up the dagger that Daniel dropped earlier, making his escape from the military. Yes, turns out Rose had that dagger, which had been passed down for a lot of generations at this point. Very interesting addition to the it/Pennywise mythology that we now have some kind of shield to use against him, right? I hope Daniel's okay. So yeah, the military has a really dumb plan. Let's go to where it/Pennywise is the strongest, guys. But I guess they feel they have Dick Hallorann, right? Although General Shaw, as I said, ends up serving him up to it/Pennywise on a silver platter. And you know, they are I don't know. You think they're giving it/Pennywise a run for his money? I don't think so, besides Dick Hallorann, which is why Dick Hallorann, it/Pennywise is trying to get him to switch sides. So the dumb plan is to secure the pillars, the artifacts made from that fallen star that the Native Americans buried in the ground and now the sewers all those years ago, and move those pillars closer together so Pennywise has less space to maneuver, and they can, as Rose says, you think you can put a leash on this thing? Interesting, but we'll see. But my thought was, how do you secure these pillars? And as you move them closer together, how do you make sure you don't accidentally let it/Pennywise slip out, right? And also, speaking of being locked down by these pillars, maybe that's why he wants Dick Hallorann to help him get past the pillars, right? So yes, the military locks down the house on Neibolt Street. Very Stranger Things, which of course is an homage to Stephen King's work. And it's crazy to see adult soldiers where we've seen the kids in the past movies in those same locations. Although these soldiers really need to work on their team building exercises because they fall apart pretty quickly down there. They don't have the bond of the Losers Club. The Uncle Sam gag was fantastic. But Hanlon and Russo have a bond, which turns out to be a tragic bond. So from a writing perspective, if you want to be a writer, pay attention to this particularly, because this is just so beautifully set up. It's the layers, it's the rounds, as the situation evolves, right? So before they go into the sewers, the military says, if you see something or someone down there that's not supposed to be there, you shoot it. And sure enough, Pennywise first attacks Leroy Hanlon as his wife, Charlotte. But because Russo can't see the illusion, he helps Leroy to realize that it's a trap. I love that Pennywise always gives himself away with the buck teeth and the lazy eye. But yeah, I wonder why Pennywise didn't appear to both of them as Charlotte. I mean, Russo knows who Charlotte is. He pointed her out to Leroy of going down to see the police. He knows her well enough to tell on her. I think for most of the illusions, they've been joint illusions, although not with Marge, I guess. Seems sloppy. I guess maybe Pennywise likes to play. He does like to play with his food, actually. So maybe that's what was going on. Maybe he knew he was setting up a really dangerous situation. All right, so round 2, right? Will, who actually is in the sewer with the rest of the Losers Club. Did you see them recreate that shot near the train from the movie? But he comes running around the corner and his father almost shoots him, thinking it's another illusion. But this time Russo can see him as well. And he steps in front of the bullet, sacrificing himself to save Will. Very sad scene, particularly for a character we've hardly interacted with. So kudos to that actor. It's okay, it's my turn. And then he says, I made it count. And then he tells Leroy to make sure that Leroy makes it count. Wow. And the show worked very hard to make it clear that Russo was dead. Leroy takes his body out of there. A couple of characters are like, he sure is dead. So that when they could have showed his body, but anyway, so when Dick Hallorann sees Russo at the end, we know it's a ghost. Also, because of the eyes to really help sell it, right? But he's lost, alone, unsure of what happens next. I hope Dick doesn't freak out. I hope Dick's able to help him. But I thought that was very powerful. So how'd the kids do down there? Oh, they went on a trip, all right. The drug-induced kind. 3 Valium? Lily, your mom might pop those like M&Ms, but she's a fully grown adult, and you're just kids. It really did a number on them, although it was adorable when Marge and Rich held hands. I love them. Marge has left the patty cakes and joined the Losers Club, maybe because she realizes that in stories like this, popular kids don't last that long. No kids last that long here. You want to be part of the Losers Club. I guess that's your best shot. However, not only are these kids hopped up on Valium, but this is very interesting to me. General Shaw admits he remembered Derry before he returned, thanks to taking LSD as part of a military program, far away from Derry. And yet taking that LSD allowed him to remember. And that's a real life thing. They really were experimenting with drugs at that time with the military. But this is a very interesting through line, the Valium, the LSD, right? Native Americans, of course, have rituals with hallucinogens. And in It Chapter 2, Mike drugs Bill after taking it himself to better understand what they need to do to combat It/Pennywise. Also, it goes even further. Remember that Will is an adult. Before he and his wife, Ronnie, die in that fire, they're accused of being drug addicts. But maybe they were taking drugs in some way to deal with the It/Pennywise situation. Slippery slope, Muschietti. Slippery slope with this storyline. But we'll see where they go with it. All right, speaking of the Hanlons, when Charlotte sees Hank being taken off to Shawshank, the bus, by the way, has an accident. That's how Hank escapes. And it seems that the accident is the work of It/Pennywise. But anyway, sure enough, It/Pennywise is at the station when Hank is getting on the bus, appearing to Charlotte as a white, corrupt, violent police officer. Remember, It/Pennywise embodies your worst fears. And that really, it's perfect for Charlotte as she's a civil rights activist. I thought that was very interesting. At least Leroy has finally told his wife what's happening to get her to move to the base. But how much has he told her? All right, now we're all on the same page, as HBO only gave out the first 5 episodes to press. So you haven't seen the last 3 episodes, and neither have I. And it seems like they're going to be real doozies. It/Pennywise, Mrs Kersh, Dick Hallorann, and the Hanlons seem to be our key players. Although, what's going on with Lily? Again, you got to ask yourself why. What's going on with this character? Her history with Juniper Hill is very specific, and It/Pennywise has not killed her twice now. Not at the movie theater, and also not down at the sewer. And he used her to lure the kids down to the sewer. Is she just really lucky, or is it intentional? You know, Mrs. Kersh is getting older. Perhaps Pennywise is looking to recruit, and Lily really has no family. Also, what's going to happen to General Shaw versus Rose? Whew, he's blaming the Native Americans for how poorly things went on down in the sewers. And of course, we're heading towards our big explosive event for the 1962 feeding period. And I do believe it's most likely going to involve the black spot. All right, share your thoughts and predictions down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.